Climate flashpoints, record wildfires in Canada and Maui, and massive flooding from the first tropical storm to hit Southern California in 84 years. So what does this say about our planet? Hi everyone, I'm Sean Caleb sitting in for Anand Naidu, and you are watching The Heat. Welcome, everyone. President Joe Biden is now touring the damage on Maui, the Hawaiian island devastated by the deadliest U.S. wildfire in more than a century. Across the border, Canada has seen a record number of wildfires, more than 5,800, burning more than 1,500 square kilometers, 150,000 rather, from one end of Canada to the other. And Southern California is seeing flash flooding in a typically dry community, such as Tropical Storm Hilary, dumping more than half the average rainfall in some desert areas, as well as mountain regions. Now joining us from San Diego is CGTN's Frank Contreras, and with us from Maui and the historic town of Lahaina, destroyed by wildfires, is CGTN's Dan Williams. Dan, I'm going to start with you. President Biden is now on the island. Just saw him speaking before I walked out here. What can you tell us about his reception there, what he's saying, and the on-covering operation? Do we know any more about the cause of this devastating wildfire?
Yeah, currently the President, Joe Biden, and the First Lady are at this moment touring the damage that you see behind me. He arrived just under 2 hours ago on Air Force One, and then transferred over to Marine One and circled around this area behind me a couple of times. It really gives a scale of the damage that was inflicted through this town, almost 2 weeks ago. Now he was met at the airport by the Hawaii Governor Josh Green and the Hawaii First Lady Jamie Green, and they were joined on that tour. He's now down on the ground. He's meeting first responders as well as state, local leaders as well, getting a real sense of what's needed, but also survivors too, given, of course, all that happened there, both at the time and since as well, the response to it. And of course, as well, added to that, in terms of the cause, that investigation is still ongoing. We know, of course, that Hawaiian Electric, they are under investigation as to whether they should have switched off those power lines while there was a passing hurricane, very high winds taking place at the time. That investigation, though, is still ongoing.
Okay, Dan. Now, Frank, record rainfall, massive floodings in Southern California. You have covered hurricanes before, but now we're looking at the first tropical storm in Southern California in 84 years. So what's the damage? What are people saying, and how are they dealing with this?
Well, here on the ground, it's a little surprising for me. As you point out, Sean, we expected there to be massive damage because of the amount of water, the sheer amount of rain that came down overnight here in San Diego. It was about 3 inches of rain. That would be somewhere around 8 centimeters of rain overnight. That's more than you get in more than half a year usually. And so what we should have seen probably was massive areas of flooding. Overnight, there were trees that fell and knocked over power lines, leaving large sectors of this part of Southern California in the dark. People passed the night with no electricity in their homes. There were massive boulders that came down in the mountainous areas onto highway systems. But this morning and later today, things have gotten back to normal very, very quickly. In fact, the San Diego Padres professional baseball team is about to have a game any minute now here in the downtown area. Wow. And it seems that the downtown part of this city in Southern California has gotten back to normal very quickly. Governor Gavin Newsom of California and the mayor of San Diego, Todd Gloria, both declared states of emergency in the local level and at the state level. What does that do? It gives them federal disaster relief funds from the federal government. The president himself, President Biden, promising that funds will arrive. But when you ask people on the ground, what do they think happened here? They say, well, they're telling us the media exaggerated what took place here, that there was not the disaster that we all expected or had been reporting. Across the border in Mexico and Baja California, they had 33 centimeters of rain, more than 3 times as much rain that fell here. There was 1 death reported there, no deaths so far here. Authorities in California reporting no major deaths. So what does this tell us about climate change in our time, Sean? I think it says something like there's going to be moments where we're going to get disaster alerts. Governments are obligated to tell their people that they must take precautionary measures. Otherwise, we run great risks of massive disasters, the possibility of losing property and homes. And then at the same time, there's the possibility that the next day could be clear, as we're seeing here now. So it's a strange mixture here. It does feel to me that that something strange is taking place. When you looked at the satellite images in the days leading up to the storm, the areas covered by clouds were massive. You know, it looked like dense cloud coverage. But again, today, no puddles, no flooding, no disaster here in Southern California to speak of in large degree.
Well, Frank, whether it was good planning or luck, I'm sure the people of San Diego and Southern California will take it. Thanks very much. And that is our Frank Contreras. Now, Dan's going to stick around with us. And Dan, I want to ask you, we heard Frank talk about obviously the ills of climate change. Now, it's too early to estimate the full cost of rebuilding on Maui, but officials believe it's going to take years and years and years for the island to recover. And how will it recover? That's going to be a tone of concern moving forward. And the experts are saying it's going to cost billions in Lahaina alone. State and local officials saying last Monday that they would consider a moratorium on sales of damaged or destroyed properties in an effort to prevent outsiders, the predators really, from taking advantage of this tragedy. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's the big concern. Whenever you speak to a lot of the residents here, it's that big concern of whether there'll be now this kind of gentrification of this town, whether some of the big property developers will come in, snap up some of these prime property and build kind of large hotels and the like. That's a real, as I say, a real concern for many of the residents here. What I can say is that I was even speaking to one resident today, and they say that they were offered money as well for their plot of land here. So it really goes to show that it's a real, very real possibility, a very real concern. Now, as you say, it will take years to rebuild this town. There's no doubt about it. We're still not really even into that kind of rebuilding phase. We're still really in the recovery phase. We're still, missing more than 1,000 people, according to the latest reports, and that is, of course, deeply concerning for the population. That's really very much front of mind. In terms of, though, that rebuilding process, I was speaking to Archie Kalepa. Now, he is one of the kind of legendary community figures here. He's a long-term life-saving leader here and worked in kind of the big kind of surf area for some years. Now, he led his community, his native Hawaiian community, in the days following this disaster, really kind of bringing supplies in from out of town and calling on his network of friends and colleagues to really support that story. But what he did say, though, is that we've got one chance really to get it right. That's today, and the people of Hawaii, the people of Lahaina, need to be part of that discussion.
Absolutely. Okay, Dan's been good enough. He's going to stick with us for the entire half hour. Now let's introduce you to the rest of our panel. Michael K. Dorsey is the director of Arizona State University's Sustainability Solutions Service and also a professor at ASU's College of Global Futures. Welcome back. We look forward to chatting with you. And Hilton Raethel. He is the president and CEO of Healthcare Association of Hawaii. And also, Hilton, thank you very much. I want to begin with you. Let's talk about what's going on the ground. Hundreds of people still missing, as many as 800 I read earlier. More than 100 people have perished. They know that right now. Everyone is wondering, how did this happen? Why was there such a seemingly pathetic warning to the people of this wonderful historic village?
Well, the current counts are 114 confirmed deaths, and as of this morning, 850 unidentified or unaccounted for individuals. This really is a tragedy for the state of Hawaii and also for the nation to have this type of a incident where so many people have lost their lives, and the death toll could continue to rise fairly dramatically given the number of unaccounted individuals. Maui is a beautiful island, and Lahaina is a beautiful spot. Access is a real issue in terms of getting in and out. The force of the winds or the wind gusts on that day and the inability of people to get out because of the limited number of roads definitely contributed to this tragedy.
Well, give us a sense of what life is like on the ground there right now. And people have seen damage from all over the world, but this seems to be one of these horrific instances where no matter how much you see the video, it just doesn't do the sheer devastation justice.
I was able to visit Maui on Friday, just last Friday, a few days ago, with a group of healthcare leaders. We met, went to a number of the shelters, talked to a lot of healthcare personnel, other leaders in the community, and actually spent some time on the ground in Lahaina, not in the actual impact zone, but we spent some time at the Civic Center, which is on the other side of Lahaina. So we drove through that entire area, and the pictures do, as you can see from these pictures, it truly does look like a war zone. There are houses that have been totally destroyed. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of vehicles that have been totally decimated. There, you can see molten metal, vinyl fences, PVC fences that have just melted onto the ground, boats that are sunk in the harbor, fiberglass melted, glass melted. It is devastating indeed, and it just points to how quickly this fire developed. There was a fire that was contained early in the morning on Tuesday, or partially contained, and then because of the wind gusts, it flared up dramatically, and then unfortunately overnight took out most of Lahaina.
Okay, Hilton, we'll get back to you in a second. I also want to bring in Mojtaba Sadegh. He is a climate scientist and associate professor at Boise State University. Moshi, thanks for joining us. I certainly appreciate it. Now, your expertise is as a climate scientist who's also an engineer, looking at wildfires and climate relationship. Now, you've pointed out last week that around 7% of the United States, more than 20 million people, last week were within 5 kilometers of a dangerous wildfire. What does this tell you about what's happening around the world?
I appreciate being with you. Well, the 21 million people is over 20 years. So over 20 years from 2000 to 2019, over 21 million people found themselves within 3 miles of large fires. And this is not just any fire. These are large fires within contiguous US. Basically, this is pointing to the increasing number and size of large wildfires and them being close to human societies, basically being within hours or minutes of reaching those communities and impacting so many people.
Right. Dan, I want to bring you in for a little bit of a deeper dive. Now, you've been around covering all sorts of natural disasters, as Frank earlier. Give us some insight into what the people are saying there, the bitterness, the frustration, and there's something that you and I, covering these things, could never fully appreciate, and that's also the loss of culture.
Absolutely, yeah, all of those things. I think this one in particular, there's a lot of frustration with how as we've been hearing there, just how the initial response was towards this fire. So a lot of anger about that, why these sirens didn't go off. There's a network of 80 of them on this island alone. This suggestion that people might be able to run up into the mountains and towards the wildfire. We heard from the Governor, Josh Green, yesterday saying that really, if he had one wish, it would be that those alarms would have sounded. So that's the first thing, a lot of frustration there, but frustration still as well towards just this response. So the first couple of days, there are definite learnings here if we are going to be into this new kind of cycle of devastation, this new cycle of extreme weather events. There are learnings here for us all. This was not an island necessarily that thought that there would be these kind of wildfires here. They're used to tsunamis and hurricanes and the like, but not this type of wildfire. So certainly there will be learnings here for us all around the globe. And certainly there's a real sense, as we were talking earlier, about the future, this real insecurity as to whether this town, this historic town, culturally rich, whether that can return, or whether after a couple of years, there's that sense now that people want to return, they want to rebuild, but 2 years down the line, if people have moved away, will they come back? Will they not just in the end sell their property, move on if they can, or set up home elsewhere. So there's real concern that this town has been lost forever. There's a lot of people hoping that isn't the case, working to ensure that isn't the case, but of course only time will tell on that one.
Okay, Dan, thanks. Michael, thank you for being so patient. Sorry it took me so long to get to you, but obviously this is somewhat of a fluid story. Now, you've been following and covering fires and doing research into fires for quite some time now. Give us a bit about your background, the knowledge that you've gained, and it's a lot more than anecdotal knowledge. And what have you learned specifically just about the way the climate is affecting areas, sucking the moisture out of plants, trees, the things that burn very quickly once they do lose that?
So, thanks so much, Sean, for raising that question. There's several key insights that we've, accumulated over many years. First and foremost, as you well know, your listeners know, carbon dioxide is increasing in its amounts in the atmosphere. This is driving the unfolding climate crisis and warming the Earth overall. This fact and this problem is driving extreme weather events. It's making areas like those in Maui drier, like those we've seen in Canada with the Canadian wildfires. It's making many areas drier and susceptible to these intense, extreme wildfire activity. The number of those has been increasing over the years. We now, in early August, before the fires in Maui, the U.S. has recorded 15 catastrophic weather events, a mixture of some fire-related, some tornadic activities, extreme flooding, and so forth, each of them costing more than $1 billion. For the 40 years previous, we saw barely half as many of those kind of $1 billion, per event, incidents per year. So we're now in a time where we're seeing more extreme weather. The cost of those is rising, and we see the impacts upon lives and livelihoods. Sympathies and condolences to those, in Maui, absolutely. But the lives and livelihoods is growing. The loss of life and livelihoods is growing, and the impacts on ecosystems is growing as the climate crisis continues to, expand and exacerbate unabated.
Yeah. Hilton, let me bring you in. Joe Biden is on the ground right now. We talked about that. Give us a sense for what people are thinking right now, because the president was widely criticized for being very muted right when this happened, and now coming in at a time when many Native Hawaiians are saying now is not the time to come to Maui. What's the feeling on the ground? I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable situation, but it's a difficult question.
We're very appreciative that the president and his wife are actually visiting Hawaii. It does show their commitment to the people of Hawaii and the people of Maui and Lahaina in terms of the rebuilding for this community. Normally when federal help is available, or often when federal help is available, they will pay part of the cost, and other agencies or individuals or organizations pay additional costs, the remaining costs. The governor, Governor Josh Green, who is a physician, has been able to negotiate with President Biden to get 100% of the costs covered for a number of different areas. There are approximately 1,000 federal individuals on the ground on Maui right now. There is a huge, we have all the agencies here supporting our governor and the mayor of, the governor of the state, the mayor of Maui, and the people of Hawaii. So there is a huge outpouring of support, of commitment to rebuild the infrastructure in a very culturally sensitive way to make sure that people get back to work. About 80% of the economy on Maui is dependent on tourism. And there are many, many people who do not have jobs or who have reduced hours right now because of the drop-off in tourism. We need to ensure that we do support the entire island of Maui. Only the Lahaina portion is directly impacted by the fire, even though the whole community is grieving. But there are hundreds and thousands of people on Maui who are going about their jobs, going about their daily lives right now, going to their jobs. They need to be able to do that. They need to be able to send their kids to school. They need to be able to pay their mortgages.
Right.
They need to be able to buy groceries. So it is a balance between respecting what has happened in Lahaina while still taking care of the entire island of Maui.
Dan, simple question. Do the people in Maui right now feel victimized by climate change? Dan? I don't know if you can hear me.
Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry, I missed that one. Do people
feel victimized by climate change?
I think that I think it's just too soon to be, for a lot of people to be thinking about that here right now. I think that there's just a lot of people where they're just so in this moment that the thoughts of, kind of climate change and the like are not really at the front of their mind. I mean, obviously that is the bigger question. It's the bigger question. I went to Canada a couple of weeks ago and covered the wildfires there, and certainly that is kind of front of mind. And certainly when you when you go to these kind of fire zones, you do realize that when they're starting to talk about this kind of more combustible kind of fuel, i.e. kind of trees that are just more dry this year than last year, the undergrowth being more dry this year than previous years, that really is a key concern for the fire and emergency services and those that are in control of that. But for the town people here right now, their focus is just obviously still hoping. I went to a gas station yesterday. The person asked who we were and then just said that they're just still missing so many families and friends. It's been 2 weeks. It's a desperate situation. That's all they're worried about right now.
Moj, I saw you shaking your head when Dan was talking about the last portion there. Former President Trump pulled the United States out of the historic Paris Accord. What did that do to the United States' effort to fight climate change, to deal with climate change?
Well, obviously that was a setback, but we are back on track now with federal efforts. Doesn't mean that we are doing enough, but it means that we are trying to make things better. What climate change, when it comes to climate change, we have more and more dry forests, and we have a lot more frequent dry, hot, windy conditions. So what it makes us more vulnerable to fires of this sort to happen. And so the faster that we can curb the impacts of climate change, the faster that we can get our communities back to more safety from wildfires.
Mike, I want to pull you off the thought of fires for just a second. Now, you live in Arizona, and Phoenix had that stretch of more than 30, 40 days in a row of temperatures above 115, 46 degrees Celsius. Now we see Southern California being hammered by the remnants of what was a very powerful hurricane. Kind of bring us into how things have changed over the past couple of decades, because the only thing I can think of that even comes close to this is what happened in New Orleans with Katrina. More than 1,800 people dying along the Gulf Coast. Certainly no one expecting that, and then everybody trying to figure out what went wrong.
So look, Sean, as the planet warms, this warming that we are seeing and experiencing, it's going to produce and has been producing, more extreme weather events with more frequency. So we're going to see not just more catastrophic events like the tropical storm that emerged out of the hurricane as it came on land, coming up in California, but we're going to see more hurricanes in the Gulf as well as the Pacific. We're going to see more cyclonic activity in the southern hemisphere. We're going to see more extreme fire events, and these are going to increasingly threaten individuals and communities, and also have devastating implications for ecosystems. The warming climate is actually also warming the oceans, and we know that warming ocean is driving more intense cyclones and hurricanes around the world. So we're going to see more of these things, and the cost of them is going to increase, and it has been increasing, as I was saying before. We lived in a world where we had roughly about half a dozen $1 billion or more catastrophic, weather events. Now we're up to almost 20 of those events a year, more than one a month. And that's just in the United States, but this is not limited to the United States at all. We see this around the world. We see this in Africa, in Asia, in Australia, in Europe. These problems are going to worsen until we begin to reduce the amount of warming, reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that we're polluting the atmosphere with, and get a hold of the unfurling climate catastrophe that we are living in right now.
Moj, I would like to get you to dovetail on that, because we're now going into an area that is going to be characterized by La Nina instead of El Nino. And the important thing for our viewers to understand is El Nino usually means cooler weather conditions, which is hard to believe considering how hot the United States has been over the past number of years. What are your major concerns looking forward?
Well, what is expected to happen is for certain portions, for certain forests of especially northwest U.S. That have seen considerable amount of growth in the past couple of years, and we have had a little bit of a deficit of fires, by the way, in some of those forests. We expect them to become drier in the next couple of years, and that is a dangerous condition because we have a lot of fuel, and the forest is expected to be drier because of the natural variability that we have on top of the climate change impacts that makes everything warmer. So that's the situation that we are concerned about, and we are watching what's going to happen.
Hilton, we're almost out of time. We got about a minute and a half. I'd like to have you have the last word and just try to convey to people here in the mainland, across the United States, across the world, how important this community is, what it means to the people of Hawaii, and the concern moving forward if developers and speculators do move in there.
Lahaina is a very special place for the people of Hawaii. It is the seat of the Hawaiian royalty from many, many decades ago. There are many historical aspects of the state that were destroyed during the fire. There is a very real sense that we need to rebuild to support that community, but do it in a very culturally sensitive way. The governor and the mayor and the people of Hawaii, the people of Lahaina, will have a voice in that rebuilding. They will have a say in how it's rebuilt. It's not going to turn into a tourist resort. We're very, very committed to preserving the culture and the legacy and this incredible place that was and will be Lahaina.
And the federal support is there right now.
It is.
Okay. Hilton, I really want to thank you, and Moji, Michael, and Dan as well. Thank you all for standing by and talking to us this past half hour. It is a horrific story. Thank you guys for putting a face on it. I'm sure we're going to be looking at this down the road as well. And that does it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Sean Calebs here in Washington, D.C. Thanks, everyone, for watching.